This happened back in the mid-80s, before cell phones, before GPS, before everyone was glued to a screen all day. It was a time when getting lost in the woods really meant something. I was in my late 20s, and 3 of my close friends and I had formed a little hiking group. We all lived in Oregon, and our favorite place to go was the Cascade Range. Not the usual trails either. We liked going deep, off-trail, way out past where the maps get vague and the trees grow thicker and older. It wasn't about danger or thrills. We just liked finding places people didn't go. There was something sacred about that. This trip was no different, at least it didn't start any different. We packed up like we always did. Heavy packs, topographic maps from the Forest Service, water filters, enough food for 5 or 6 days. We always brought 2 tents, splitting between 2 guys in each. One of my friends, Mike, was sort of a local celebrity. He'd done a few nature columns for an Oregon magazine, had been on local TV a few times talking about wildlife, that kind of thing. He wasn't famous, but if someone like him vanished, people would notice. That ended up being important later. We drove out to the usual access point off a gravel road past Detroit Lake, hiked up a known trail for a day, and set up camp just before sundown at our launch spot. This was standard for us. Spend a night at a known location, study the maps, then go deep the next morning. The forest was thick and wet that year. We were going in September, early fall, and the weather was still decent, cool nights but dry, no snow in the forecast. Just the crunch of needles underfoot, the sound of wind in the canopy, and the occasional sound of elk if you were quiet enough. That night we had a fire, cooked dinner, passed around a flask, nothing excessive. We didn't do drugs, nothing harder than a bit of bourbon to keep warm. We turned in a little after 10, planning to wake up early and pick a direction. That's the last thing we all remembered, looking at maps, talking about going northwest through a low valley, and then nothing. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and my mouth dry as hell. I felt like I'd been on a week-long bender. I sat up slowly and noticed right away that something felt wrong. I was still in the same clothes as the night before. I hadn't gotten into my sleeping bag, just collapsed on top of it. I looked around and saw the others slowly waking up, all looking groggy and confused. One of the guys, Don, checked his watch, frowned, then said, "Is this thing broken?" Mike checked his too. The date had jumped ahead 1 day. We hadn't slept 8 hours, we'd lost 24. First, we thought it was a mistake. Maybe the watches had reset. But both of them? Then I checked mine. Same thing. That sick feeling in my gut got worse. It didn't make sense. We all looked like we'd been knocked out. No signs of struggle, no signs we'd packed up or moved. The fire was out. Everything was in place, but we had no memory of the entire previous day. My friends were quiet, shaken. I asked if anyone remembered anything, even flashes. They all said no, but I did, just a little. Came to me in pieces like fog clearing over a lake. I remembered walking, steep uphill, thick forest, legs burning from the climb. I remembered stopping, hearing something weird. Children, not just one, but lots of kids, laughing and yelling like they were at recess. It made no sense. We were deep in the forest. The nearest school had to be 30 miles away. At first, we thought we were losing it, but the sound was real. We followed it. We came out of the woods into a clearing. That part's burned into my memory. The ground was paved in parts like someone had laid down sections of asphalt years ago. There were several buildings, low, blocky, olive green. They looked like military buildings. No style, just function. Around the buildings was a tall, industrial-grade chain-link fence with barbed wire on top. Inside were kids, dozens of them, maybe more. Some were on a blacktop playing basketball, others just running around. And there were adults too, men and women in plain clothes, no uniforms, no insignia. It looked like a summer camp crossed with a prison. We stood there, frozen, just outside the fence. I remember how all the noise slowly stopped as people started noticing us. First a few of the adults, then the kids. It was like the air got sucked out of the place. Everyone just stared. I remember one man in particular. He was holding a basketball mid-dribble, just staring at us. That's the last thing I remember before waking up in the tent. After that, my friends refused to talk about it. They didn't want to hear about what I remembered. All they cared about was getting out of there, and fast. We packed up that day and hiked straight back to the truck. No stops. The whole way back, they kept quiet, eyes scanning the trees like they were expecting someone to jump out at any minute. We didn't even camp again, just made the long hike in one go. Once we were back home, I kept thinking about what we saw, or what I thought I saw. I went over the maps again and again, trying to figure out where we could have gone. None of the maps showed any structures in that area. I even tried looking at older maps in the local library. Nothing. No old military base, no camp, no schools. I asked around too, quietly, carefully. I even asked a friend who had a contact in the Forest Service. He told me flat out that there was nothing like that out there. Not even old logging camps that matched the description. It was as if that place didn't exist. I pushed my friends to go back with me. I told them we could bring cameras, mark the route better, retrace our steps. Every single one of them shut me down. Don told me he was done with hiking altogether. Mike got angry, told me to drop it. The others ignored me completely. I never saw that group together again. I didn't go back alone. I wanted to, badly. I packed more than once, drove out there, even hiked back to the original launch point. But I knew better. You don't go that deep into the woods by yourself. Not without backup. Not when something like this had already happened once. It's been decades now. I still hike, but I don't go off trail anymore. I stick to the safe stuff. I've told the story a few times, usually late at night over a beer, and always to people who don't know me well. I leave out the names, play it down. Everyone thinks it's either a dream or that I'm making it up. I get it. I'd probably think the same if I heard it from someone else. But I know what I saw. I remember that compound, the fence, the buildings, the people watching us like we weren't supposed to be there. I remember waking up the next day, dumped like trash in our tents, our memories scrubbed clean. I still don't know who did it or why we weren't killed. Maybe they figured it'd be more trouble than it was worth. Maybe they thought we'd forget. And for the most part, I guess they were right. But not me. I remember, and I've spent the last 40 years trying to forget something I never should have seen. Me and 3 of my buddies decided to go for a nature walk one weekend. It was a random idea, nothing planned. Just one of those lazy Saturdays where we had nothing to do, and someone said, "Let's get outside for a bit." We were all from the same area in northeastern Pennsylvania, and most of us had grown up going into the woods, either hunting, fishing, or just screwing around. The stretch of forest we picked wasn't part of any state park or public trail. It was just some old, thick woods outside of town that people mostly ignored. No signs, no fences, nothing like that. You could walk in without seeing another person for miles. We parked my buddy Tim's truck on the side of an old gravel road and just started heading in. We had no real destination, just following a worn path that deer or other people had probably made over time. The trees were dense, tall pines mixed with thick brush and fallen logs. It had that heavy, damp smell to it. Everything was green and quiet, except for the occasional bird or the sound of our boots crunching leaves. About 30 minutes in, something felt off. It's hard to explain. The air felt a little heavier, the way it does right before a storm, but the sky was clear. And then we started hearing things. At first, it was just soft noises, branches snapping somewhere behind us, or what sounded like footsteps too close to be animals. Then we heard something more distinct. Whispers, like actual voices, low and hushed, almost like people were trying not to be heard. I looked at the guys and I could tell they heard it too. We stopped walking and just listened. The forest was still, except for those faint voices moving through the trees. There weren't any words we could make out, just murmuring. First, we joked about it. Maybe kids hiding out here trying to scare people. But the tone of those whispers, it didn't feel playful. And the fact that they kept following us as we moved, always just out of sight, made it worse. I tried to stay calm. We were all big guys, not the kind of group you'd think could be easily scared or pushed around. But I'll admit, I started to get a little paranoid. We kept walking for another 15 minutes or so, but no matter which direction we turned, the whispers never faded completely. At some point, we figured we'd stop for a bit. It was around 2 p.m. by then, and we were hungry. We found a little clearing that was flat and dry, with a fallen tree we could sit on. We gathered up some dead branches and dry brush and got a small fire going. Just enough to heat up some food we brought, hot dogs, a couple cans of beans, simple stuff. The fire helped a little, made the space feel warmer, safer maybe. We sat around, eating, cracking open a couple beers, trying to laugh it off. The whispers had stopped, or at least we couldn't hear them over the crackling fire and the sounds of us talking and moving around. Just as we were settling in, thinking maybe we'd imagine the whole thing, something ran past the clearing. Fast, human-shaped, maybe 2 or 3 of them, just on the edge of the brush. They didn't make any noise, no talking, no yelling, no heavy breathing. Just shadows running fast through the trees. Too fast. We all stood up at once. I don't remember who moved first, but in seconds we were all on our feet, scanning the woods. I reached into my pack and pulled out my 1911. I'd brought it more out of habit than fear. We weren't deep in bear country, but you never know what you might run into. And in that moment, with figures running just past our fire, I didn't feel like an idiot for carrying it. We split up just a little, cautiously walking toward where the figures had passed. The underbrush was thick, and the visibility was maybe 20-30 feet at best. We didn't go too far, maybe 100 yards out before we found something. Footprints. A lot of them going in different directions, like whoever it was had circled around our camp. But what stuck out, what really bothered us, was the size of the prints. They were small, like women's size 5, maybe 6 at most, but whoever had left them had to be tall. You could tell from the stride length and the way the grass was disturbed higher up, like branches were pushed aside at a level close to our own height. We checked around for another 10 minutes. No more sounds, no more whispers, no signs of anyone else. Eventually, we just backed off and went back to the fire. No one really said anything. We sat in silence for a while and then quietly packed up. The fun of the hike was gone. The food didn't sit right in our stomachs anymore. We just wanted out. The walk back felt longer than it had on the way in. Every little sound made us stop and look. At one point, I swore I saw someone standing behind a tree about 30 feet away. When I looked again, it was gone. Could have been my imagination. Could have been real. I don't know. None of us talked much on the walk back. We just kept our heads low and eyes up, trying to get out of there. When we got to the truck, I remember looking back one last time before we left. Just a wall of trees. No movement, no sound. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We didn't report anything. Didn't tell anyone, really. What would we even say? That we saw some people running through the woods? That we found weird footprints? It didn't feel like something the cops would care about. It didn't even feel like something we fully understood. But we never went back there again. Not once. Even now, years later, I still get a weird feeling when I drive past that area. I don't know who or what was out there. Maybe it was just some strange group messing with us. People who live off the grid or hang out in the woods for God knows what reason. But the size of those prints, the way they moved without a sound, the whispers that followed us from tree to tree, it just didn't feel right. We weren't drunk. We weren't high. We were 4 grown men in broad daylight, and we all saw the same things. To this day, none of us have any answers. But I know what I saw. I know how it felt. Something was out there watching us, and it wanted us to know it. Two years ago, I was on a long road trip with a friend of mine. We had no real destination, just a general plan to head down the coast, explore a bit, camp when we felt like it, and keep moving when we got bored. We both had a few weeks off, and we packed the car with everything we'd need: tent, food, gear, everything. We weren't exactly survivalists or anything, but we both liked the idea of getting off the grid for a bit. One night, somewhere in a remote coastal region, don't even remember the name, we found this little turnout off a narrow 2-lane road that led into a massive forested area. It was late already, maybe around 8:30, but the moon was huge that night. The kind of night where the sky feels lit up even without a flashlight. We decided to stop there for the night, but neither of us was tired yet. There wasn't a soul in sight, just thick trees the occasional distant crash of ocean waves, and the hum of insects. We saw signs that a military base was somewhere nearby. Faded, official-looking warnings nailed to trees, but nothing recent. No gates, no fences, just old rusted signs we passed on the way in. We parked the car in a dirt clearing that looked like it had been a makeshift lot once. Completely empty. We figured it was probably used by locals or hikers during the day. I don't know why we decided to hike then. Maybe it was the stillness of the place or the way the moonlight cut through the trees. We were geared up, headlamps, jackets, water, and even an emergency satellite beacon, so we felt prepared. It wasn't mountainous terrain, more like rolling forest with a faint, well-worn trail cutting through it. We locked up the car, took our packs, and started down the trail. It hit us halfway through that it was Halloween. We had been talking about the moon, how weirdly big and low it looked over the treetops, when I remembered the date. We both laughed at it, not really thinking too much. I remember saying, "Hope we don't run into any kids in costumes out here." And he made some joke about axe murderers in the woods, just dumb stuff to kill time as we walked. About 15 or 20 minutes in, we started hearing thuds, low, fast thumping sounds from deeper in the trees. The first few times, it startled us. It was loud and fast, and whatever was moving wasn't small. But we figured it was kangaroos. We weren't sure, but it made sense. Big animals, fast, tend to move in sudden bursts. After a while, it stopped bothering us. We'd hear a crash or a sudden darting sound and just glance in the direction, then keep going. The trail led closer and closer to the coast. You could hear the ocean getting louder, the steady pulse of waves hitting the rocks below. We wanted to get down to the beach, skip some stones maybe, just see what it looked like in the moonlight. But the path curved along a ridge with a steep drop on one side. We started looking for a way down when we heard something. Different this time. Not the sudden leap of an animal, but something slower. A deliberate movement. Heavy, crunching, snapping twigs. Breathing. Whatever it was climbing up from the beachside, the steep slope just off the path. We couldn't see it clearly. Too many trees and shrubs. But we could hear every branch it broke and every grunt it made as it pulled itself upward. My friend froze, then slowly started backing away. He didn't say anything, just gave me this look like, "Let's get the hell out of here." I was curious, I guess. I didn't feel afraid yet. I took a step closer to the edge and listened. Then we both heard a voice. A man's voice, quiet, shaky. "Hello." It didn't come from behind us, but right from that slope. My friend was already shaking his head, trying to gesture at me not to respond. But I couldn't help it. I stepped forward and said, "Hello." There was a pause. Then he said, "Is that the path?" That's when we both kind of relaxed. It made sense. Somebody must have slipped or gotten lost trying to find the beach. The slope was steep enough that if you weren't careful, especially at night, you could slide right off the edge. I broke a branch from a tree nearby and reached it down toward the edge. The guy took hold, and with both of us pulling, we managed to get him up. He was tall, maybe in his mid-30s, wearing a jacket and jeans. Looked like he'd been out for a while. Mud on his pants, a few scratches. He looked disoriented but not injured. He stood up, thanked us, then asked, "Have you seen my friend?" We said no. He just nodded and said, "I'm sure he'll be around. Thanks, guys," and then turned and started walking down the path in the direction we had come from. We waited a bit, not sure what to make of it. Then we shrugged it off. It was weird, but not alarming. We figured they were two hikers who got separated. It happens. We found a narrow, safer slope a little further down and made our way to the beach. The moonlight reflected off the wet rocks. The sand was cool under our boots, and we spent a few minutes skipping stones and talking about how eerie the place felt. Quiet in a way that pressed on your ears. Eventually, we decided to head back. We weren't scared exactly, but something felt off. On the way back up the trail, maybe halfway to the car, we saw them again, the man we helped and another guy standing with him. Same build, maybe a little shorter. They were just standing there on the side of the trail, talking quietly. They didn't look at us when we passed. We both said G-Day out of habit. One of them mumbled something that didn't sound like a proper reply. Just a low grunt or whisper. We didn't stop. We kept walking. When we got back to the lot, something caught both of us off guard. There was a four-wheel drive parked right in front of our car, close enough that its headlights would have lit it up when we arrived. But it wasn't there earlier. No way we missed it. The parking area was open, with just two visible tracks of dirt and gravel. We both just stood there, staring at it. There were no other signs of people. No engine noise, no doors opening, no lights on. Just a dark 4WD that hadn't been there when we arrived. We got in the car. Neither of us said anything for a while. As we drove back toward the main road, I kept looking in the rearview mirror until the trees swallowed the lot behind us. The weirdest part wasn't the guy asking for help, or even the way he just wandered off. It was the way they were standing there on the trail later, not moving, like they were waiting for something, or someone. And the 4WD, that really stuck with me. If that was their car, why wasn't it there when we got there? If it wasn't theirs, then whose was it? We didn't report it. We didn't even tell anyone for a while. But every now and then, when I think about that night, I wonder if we helped someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who didn't want to be found. Or someone who was waiting for something we never understood. We never went back. It was late afternoon, sometime around 5:30, in early spring. The sun was still up, but it had started to dip low enough that everything had a soft, golden color to it. A buddy of mine and I had about 2 hours to kill before we were supposed to head over to another friend's place for the night. Nothing major planned, just a casual get-together. Since we didn't feel like sitting around doing nothing, we decided to go for a walk. There's this popular walking path in my town that cuts through a big open field on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. The field is covered in thick brush, really tall stuff, maybe 8 feet high in some places. It grows wild and dense on both sides of the narrow dirt path. You can't see over it, and unless you were to actually step into it, you couldn't see through it either. Kind of feels like walking through a hallway of weeds and branches. It's not creepy during the day, not really. It's just quiet, peaceful, with the occasional chirping of birds or rustling of something small like a rabbit or lizard. We parked the car near the entrance to the path, locked it up, and started walking. We weren't in a rush, just taking our time, talking about random stuff. There wasn't anyone else on the trail that day. I remember that clearly. Not a single other person. The air smelled like dry grass and warm dirt. There was a light breeze, enough to make the brush shift and sway a little on both sides, like it was breathing. Every now and then, you'd hear the wind whistle through it, but that was it. No dogs barking, no distant voices, nothing. Just that low wind and the crunch of our shoes on the dirt. We walked for maybe 15 minutes. We hadn't planned to go far, just enough to pass the time and enjoy the weather. After a while, we figured we'd better head back so we wouldn't be late. We turned around and started walking the same way we came, heading back toward the car. About 5 minutes into the walk back, I saw something strange up ahead. It looked like one of those big green electrical boxes, the kind you usually see in neighborhoods near power lines or behind houses. It was just sitting there on the edge of the path, maybe 20 feet ahead. Big, square, dark green, metal-looking. At first, I didn't think much of it. But as we got closer, I suddenly realized something that made my stomach feel weird. I didn't remember it being there before. We had just walked this exact same path 15 minutes earlier. We hadn't taken any turns. There were no other side trails or offshoots. It was just a straight line through this brush field. And there had been nothing there. Nothing at all. Just dirt and weeds and that long corridor of brush. No electrical box. No sign of one. I slowed down without meaning to and just stared at it. My friend had noticed it too. We didn't say anything at first, just kept walking slowly, trying to make sense of it. I scanned the area, trying to figure out where it could have come from. There weren't any houses nearby. No buildings. Nothing even remotely modern or man-made for hundreds of feet in every direction. Just tall brush and that dirt path. It didn't make sense. What would an electrical box be powering out here? And then, out of nowhere, that thing moved. I'm not exaggerating. 1 second it was sitting there. The next, it shot sideways straight into the brush. Not rolled, not tilted, shot. Like someone had hit fast forward and yanked it away with some invisible force. It didn't wobble or bounce or slow down. It moved with this weird, fluid speed and vanished into the thick brush like it wasn't even there. It was just gone. 1 second in our line of sight, the next completely disappeared. We stopped in our tracks. I remember my feet planting themselves into the dirt like I just stepped in concrete. Couldn't move, couldn't speak. My friend was frozen too. We both just stood there, staring at the exact spot where it had been. I felt this deep, almost primal kind of confusion, like my brain couldn't catch up with what my eyes had just seen. I knew what I saw. It wasn't a shadow or a trick of the light. It was a solid, large object. And it moved in a way that nothing that size should have been able to move, especially not through 8-foot-tall brush that thick. We stood there for what felt like forever, just staring into the brush. It was completely still. The breeze had stopped. The air had this weird heaviness to it. I kept looking for movement, for a sound, for anything, but there was nothing. No rustling, no broken branches, no footprints or drag marks, just silence. Eventually, we looked at each other. I could see my friend was just as freaked out as I was, but we still had to get back to the car, and that meant walking right past the spot where that thing had disappeared. So we kept walking. When we got to the exact spot, we slowed down again. There was nothing there, nothing at all. The brush was untouched, not bent, not snapped, not flattened. It looked exactly the same as the rest of the path. If I hadn't seen what I saw with my own eyes, I would have thought nothing had happened. But something had. I knew it. My friend knew it. That wasn't some hallucination or misremembered landmark. We had walked this exact path both directions. That box was not there when we first came through. And when it disappeared, it didn't make a sound. Not even a twig cracking. Just gone. No trace left behind. The rest of the walk back to the car was silent. Neither of us said anything. I think we were both trying to process it. My heart was pounding the entire time. I felt like something was behind us, watching, but I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see it again. I just wanted to get to the car. When we got back, we both got in and locked the doors immediately. It wasn't like we were in danger, exactly. Nothing had chased us, but we felt like something had happened that didn't belong in the real world. Not in a ghost or alien kind of way, but in a wrong way. Like we had seen something that we weren't supposed to see. Something that didn't make sense in the world we knew. I've told this story a couple times to friends, but it never really lands. Sounds stupid when I say it out loud. A haunted electrical box or whatever. No one knows how to react. They think I'm joking, or lying, or just mistaken. I get it, it sounds ridiculous, but I know what I saw. So does my friend. And here's the weirdest part. About a week later, I drove past that walking trail, just out of curiosity. There was nothing there. No electrical box. No signs of construction. Nothing even close to the path. I parked and walked a bit of it again, just to be sure. Same brush, same dirt trail, same emptiness. That thing was gone, completely, like it had never been there at all. I haven't walked that trail since. I don't think I ever will. Not because I'm scared of some weird metal box, but because that moment, that exact second it moved, showed me something I still don't understand. It wasn't paranormal. It wasn't a dream. It was real. And whatever it was, it had been watching us. And it didn't want to be seen. I think about it more than I probably should. Sometimes I wonder if we just caught a glimpse of something we weren't supposed to notice. Something that normally hides just out of view, blending into the background of the world. Something that moves only when no one is looking. And we looked, we saw it, and it ran. We were deep in Yosemite, far from the main valley, several days into a backpacking trip. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. My dad planned the whole thing months in advance, carefully mapping out trails, campsites, and resupply points. We weren't using any lodges or stores. We were carrying everything we needed on our backs. It was supposed to be one of those bonding trips. No phones, no distractions, just wilderness. We'd been hiking all day through pine forests, over granite ridges, and across snow patches even though it was early summer. By the time we got to our campsite that night, We were completely worn out. Our shoulders ached, our feet were blistered, and our clothes were damp from sweat and melted snow. The sun had dipped behind the trees while we set up camp in a little clearing surrounded by thick forest. My brother and I pitched the 2 tents while my parents boiled some water on the portable stove. We had freeze-dried meals, nothing fancy, but when you're exhausted and hungry, even those pouches of mush taste amazing. After eating, we brushed our teeth far from camp, like we were taught, and sealed all of our scented items in bear cans. We tucked the cans away a short distance from the tents, under a rock overhang and some heavy stones on top, thinking that would be enough. Then we climbed into our sleeping bags and passed out. Sometime deep into the night, before the sun had even thought about coming up, I woke up to this crunching sound, like something big moving through the woods. Not fast, just slow and steady. I froze. I couldn't tell what time it was, but the air was cold, and the inside of the tent was pitch black. I thought maybe it was a deer, or some small animal stepping over dry branches. Then I heard metal clanking, a dragging sound, something scraping on rock. Then a loud thud. I sat up slowly, unzipped my sleeping bag as quietly as I could, and listened harder. The noises weren't going away. They were getting louder. At some point, my brother woke up too. He didn't say anything, but I could hear his breathing shift. Then from the other tent, I heard the soft zip of my parents' door opening. The next sound was my mom's whisper, firm but low. That's when I knew this wasn't something small. My dad unzipped our tent and we both peeked out. Right there, maybe 30 feet from where we slept, were 3 bears. 1 large adult, definitely the mother, and 2 smaller cubs. They were standing right where we'd stashed our food cans. The mother had already managed to knock over one of the cans, and it was rolling across the ground, the cubs bouncing along beside it like kids playing with a toy. Another can had been dragged out from under the rocks and was halfway opened. She must have clawed or bit into the seal. There was a strange calm to it at first, like the bears weren't in a hurry, like they'd done this before. They weren't growling or making a fuss. They were just taking our food. My dad stepped out of the tent. No shoes, just socks in the dirt. I followed behind him, heart racing, arms covered in goosebumps. The air was still heavy. The forest was dead silent except for the bears rummaging through our gear. I remember my dad squinting toward the clearing, trying to count the cans. I think we had 5 or 6. 3 of them were already moved. We were still 2 full days away from the valley, and without that food, we were basically screwed. It wasn't just a matter of being hungry. It meant risking hypothermia, exhaustion, and getting lost if we had to rush out without enough fuel. My dad knew it. He didn't say anything, just picked up a small rock from near the fire pit and threw it. It bounced harmlessly near one of the cubs. They flinched and looked up, but didn't run. The mother stood over the cans, paws on top of one, sniffing at the lid. He threw another, harder this time. It landed with a sharper crack against a tree. That got their attention. The mother bear stood up on her hind legs, tall, wide, all muscle and fur. She stared straight at us, not moving, not afraid, just staring. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. My mom was still half crouched in the other tent's doorway, whispering something under her breath. My brother stayed inside the tent, frozen stiff. Then the mother bear dropped to all 4s again and started nosing the can like we weren't even there. My dad moved to the edge of the campsite, near the treeline, and picked up a thick branch. Not a flimsy stick, a solid piece of fallen wood, maybe 4 feet long and heavy. He wound up and hurled it hard, straight at the mother bear. It hit her in the side, not hard enough to injure her, but hard enough to surprise her. She let out this sharp, guttural snarl, deep and loud, like it came from her spine, and she jerked her head up. For a second, everything stopped. Then she turned, grabbed one of the cubs by the scruff, and bolted. The other cub followed, skittering after them. They didn't go far, just out of the clearing and into the trees, but they left the bear cans behind. One of the cans was dented. Another had rolled into a bush, but they were all still there. I don't think I've ever seen my dad breathe like that before. His chest was heaving, his hands shaking a little. He walked over to the cans, checked them one by one, then dragged them farther away from camp this time, maybe 100 feet out near a boulder field. He stacked them and buried them under stones again, sweating even though it was freezing cold. None of us went back to sleep after that. We just sat in the tents, waiting for the sky to turn gray. We packed early and started hiking before breakfast. My dad didn't say anything for a long time that morning. We were all a little stunned. You go out into the wilderness expecting it to be rough, maybe rainy or cold or uncomfortable. But you don't really expect a full-grown bear and her cubs to be 5 steps from your tent in the middle of the night. You don't really expect your dad to throw a log at a bear. Later that day, once we were a couple miles in and feeling a little safer, he told us quietly that it probably wasn't the smartest thing he could have done. That we were lucky. That things could have gone very differently. A mother bear protecting her cubs can be unpredictable. They don't always run. But in that moment, he didn't see any other choice. We needed that food. We needed to get back safely. He did what he thought he had to do. We made it back to the main valley 2 days later, tired but all right. We told the rangers about the incident at the station. They nodded, said bear encounters were common that time of year, and reminded us how unpredictable wildlife can be, especially mothers with young. My dad didn't tell them about the log. I think he was a little embarrassed about it, maybe even scared after the fact. Even now, years later, when we talk about that trip, there's a strange silence when that night comes up. Not because we're trying to forget it, but because we all remember it too clearly. The sound of the cans clanking, the way the bear looked at us, the silence afterward, sticks with you, makes you respect the wild in a way that books and trail signs never can. That trip taught me something real, how thin the line can be between adventure and danger, and how quickly things can turn, even when you do everything right. We didn't lose any food. We didn't get hurt. But I know, and I think my dad knows too, that we were just plain lucky.